Where did you grow up? How many siblings? How did you grow up? Tell us the story.
Um, a somewhat abnormal childhood, I would say. At the time, I thought it was normal, but upon reflection, it's probably not very normal for a lot of people. So I grew up on a ranch, which is not too uncommon, but we had a couple hundred acres, and we had exotic animals. So we had ostrich and emus and rheas and camels. My parents had worked a normal W-2 job. They got sick of it, and this was circa 1986, and they just sold everything and they moved to the country and they started this exotic animal ranch. So that's where I spent my childhood, basically, waking up at 5 in the morning to feed the animals. And, my summers were spent building fences and barns. And, other kids were off to summer camp, but I didn't do any of that fun stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
I was a labor hand.
I knew you for a while. I didn't know the story. So let's go back. So where were they? Where were they located? Where are they from? How did they, what were they doing?
Yeah, so we grew up in Texas.
Okay.
And this is like kind of northeast of Dallas, about an hour and a half. It's East Texas. They
Okay.
call it behind the pine curtain because it's kind of where Texas stops becoming a desert and starts becoming a little more green towards
Nice.
Arkansas.
Okay.
And so, my mom, she was basically, she ran grocery stores. Worked for Sam's Club, and she was like a district manager. And my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned concrete manufacturing companies, and he owned a trailer manufacturing business, and, just odds and ends kind of things. And yeah, they just, like I said, 1986, I was 6 years old, and they turned it all in, and they moved to the countryside. Yeah, so
So
we
they
sold
sold
everything.
everything?
Sold everything, and so we spent all the money on the house, on the land. So we lived in a mobile home, lived in a single wide mobile home. I slept on a cot, had a tiny little hard cot that I slept on for like 4 or 5 years.
And
And
they were
so
what? Building a house on that property?
that was the game plan originally, but my dad was just very frugal. He's like, let's keep building. So I grew up thinking I was dirt poor, but actually they were making, a lot of money in the exotic animal game. So we went from being people that were in the poorest part of the county to when I was 16 years old, they sold the ranch, they sold the business, and they bought one of the biggest houses in the county. So like I went from being one of the poorest children to like one of the richest like overnight, seemingly from my perspective.
So that's fascinating. So how did he decide? Like, what was the trigger? Like, how do you go from being a district manager for Sam's Club, owning this, decent business, good margin? I know that industry, and then
Yeah.
just saying we're gonna sell everything. We're gonna go build an exotic animal. Like, what? What's the logic? What's the story? How did he get there?
Well, it's funny because I had this conversation with my mom quite a bit because, I work a W-2 job and I have aspirations to like be entrepreneurial one of these days. And she says like she had young kids. I was 6 years old, 5 years old. My sister was a year and a half older than me, and it was just the two of us. And they just didn't get to spend. She didn't get to spend quality time with us. So I think it was largely pushed by my mom, and my dad's entrepreneurial, so he's like, let's go buy a ranch. Let's do it. He was game for the challenge. So I think that combination, which is a rare combination if you find a couple that can basically, because they were in the trenches working together, so they were together 24/7, building this business together. So I don't
And,
know. It's
and,
hard to imagine that.
and were the exotic animal industry or game, was that a thing back then? Was that like in vogue at the
It was
time?
very nascent. So the ostrich game, I liken it a little bit to Bitcoin in some ways because it was like early days, super early adopters. But there was this narrative, and the narrative was that ostrich meat was essentially going to take over. And the reason why is because it tastes like beef, but it's healthy like chicken, like low
Yeah.
cholesterol. And there were some problems with like the scalability, but everybody said we'll make it up in volume, because these birds take 2 years to mature and they cost $10 a day to feed, so that makes a very expensive patty.
Yeah.
But nobody was worried about that because they were like, no, no worries, guys, we'll scale this up, it'll be fine. So that was circa 1986. By 1996, this had become a household name. People were, putting ostriches in their backyard to try to create, because we basically had these huge incubator rooms, And it went from the early days of being a pair of ostrich would go for about $2,000, and towards the end they were going for $20,000 a pair. So you can just an ostrich lays an egg every other day. So we'd put these eggs in incubators, and we had these big greenhouses, and we'd keep the 0 to 3 month, the 3 to 6, and the 6 to 9 month, chicks together, and then we would sell them. And it was a printing machine.
So the business model didn't work, obviously, because
The business model worked great, but it was a model that was like this. That's why I say I don't mean to make any references to Bitcoin's viability or not. I just mean it was a phenomenon at the time, and it kind of became this thing that the narrative caught hold, and a lot of people got on board. But the people at the end, they definitely, in 1996 the market crashed.
yeah.
Because people figured out the unit economics.
That's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say.
Economics of a bird raising them for 2 years to make a small amount of meat does not work. It doesn't matter how much scale you throw at it. The unit economics don't work. It doesn't work.
But they were early in that industry, so therefore they benefited from the trend growing. And wow, that's fascinating. And then so they built this 200-acre property, and then they exited after how long? 10 years?
About 9 years.
9 years. And it was solely focused on ostriches, or you had other things?
Well, my dad loved the exotic animals, so he would go to these exotic animal farms. They would have them in St. Louis. They would have an auction, and so they would bring every kind of animal through there you can imagine. So we just had dozens of different kinds of animals. I was allowed to bring home whatever I wanted.
What's the most exotic thing that you had?
I mean, we had, I don't know, flying squirrels. We had zebra. We didn't have any lions or tigers because you had to have a special permit in Texas. So it's like the only thing you need a permit for. But you can have anything else. Wow. But every species of bird you can think of, and iguanas and hedgehogs. When I was 14, I started a hedgehog business. I created a little hedgehog factory because hedgehogs was like, I don't know, like late
I remember that.
Late 89 or so, and it was a hot thing, and everybody wanted a hedgehog. So I was like, that was me. I didn't sell cookies or anything like that. I was
that a good business?
That was a great business, especially for a young kid.
That's funny. So you went at 6-year-old, you went from this like normal going first grade school, and then you're
living
like
in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, living in Dallas, and then you're dumped into, how does that into this ranch? How did you react? What was your what did you think about it at the time, and how did you think about it through that period?
So I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like it wasn't me, but I felt sort of trapped. So when I was 9 years old, 3 years later, I was a big reader. So I read everything I could get my hands on, and I read Robinson Crusoe, and it's this book about a castaway that lives on an island, and he kind of just survives. And I was so fascinated by this concept. And I just was sick of the labor. I was sick of like the small town. I just wanted out. I wanted to live on an island. I'd never even seen the ocean, but I knew that I wanted to live on an island. And so I started planning, and I, had a little notebook, and I made all my plans, and I was going to steal a plane from DFW airport, and I was going to fly to the island, and I wanted to bring a cow because I like to drink milk. I was going to bring some seeds so I could plant my garden. And I worked on this for months, and I told my teachers at school. I had talked to one of my best friends at the time. I talked him into coming with me, and so everybody thought I just had a creative imagination, but no, I was serious. And one Saturday night, I just packed up my bags, had my buddy spend the night, and we crawled out my bedroom window of that mobile home, and we took off. And so the next morning, my parents wake up. Obviously, they freak out. They call the police, and most runaway kids, they get picked up on the side of the road because the police just like scour the area, and you can see the kids walking down the road, and you pick them up. But they did that. The police were out searching the streets, but we couldn't be found because we were just following the map and going as the crow flies, cutting across fields, walking straight towards DFW. And so they couldn't find us. And so the Hunt County Sheriff's Department was out looking for us. They had planes up that were looking for us. And towards sunset the next day, they caught us. And I still remember like coming up over this ridge and having a police officer with a megaphone like, Jeremy Thacker, Josh Baxter. And, we put up our hands and like we, got thrown into the back of the squad car and taken home. So my adjustment was like, I didn't want to adjust, but I just survived it. But when I turned 18, I joined the military. I said, send me anywhere in the world. And they sent me to Germany for 2 years. So I did get out eventually, but I had to wait till the legal age.
Oh, wow, that's crazy. But when you made the transition from being the poorest to the wealthiest, how did that affect you? You were 16 by then. It was kind of late.
So my sister really benefited from it because she was beautiful in high school, and like suddenly we moved to the closest town to us, which was 25 minutes away, and it was 30,000 people. So suddenly we're in this big town, and she's a big deal because we also, even though we had a new property and this big beautiful home on it, we still had some exotic animals just because my dad loved them. So we were like the exotic animal family that lived in the fancy mansion, and my sister loved it. But me, I was like this super introverted kid because I was actually this chubby kid growing up. I just was introverted. I was reading my books all the time. I do my work on the farm, but I kept to myself. So to me, I saw no benefit of it for a while until I turned 17. And when I turned 17, I got a job sacking groceries. And you can work when you're 17 with parents' permission in Texas. So I was sacking groceries, and I did it for a summer. And at the start of the summer, I was this chubby kid. And in that Texas heat, there was 2 jobs I had to do. I had to, one, run. Every time I took someone's groceries to their car, I had to run back to the inside of the store because there was another customer waiting, and we are a customer service business. Number 2 rule from the manager was you smile and greet every customer. Hello, Miss So-and-so. Great to see you today. And I started doing that, and 2 things happened. One, I realized if you just smile to people and talk to them, they just love talking.
Yeah.
And they'll just open up and you just get to know people. And the second thing I learned is like, if you run in the Texas heat, you will drop some weight quick. So suddenly I was this skinny kid that lived in this fancy house that went back to school. That was, I guess, my senior year. And they thought I was a new kid in school. I was. They're like, oh, this new guy, Josh, joined school. And it's like, and so suddenly I was like, could date anybody I wanted in the school. It was amazing. It was like this transformation. So, it was an interesting time. We'll say that.
That's fascinating. So how did that affect you, being this new guy, this transformation?
It gave me a lot of, I think, gave me a lot of confidence where I didn't have it before. Before that, the only person that had really invested in me and given me confidence was my grandfather. He thought I could do no wrong, and I was like the favorite grandchild of like 18 grandkids, and he gave me some internal confidence. But now I was getting all this external confidence from everyone else of like, suddenly being, this because I'd read a lot, so I was smarter than the average person. But suddenly everybody took notice of me, and then when I became like this person that would actually talk to people, they would realize, oh, he actually is not stuck up, and it's just that he was shy and he just didn't talk to people.
Yeah.
And so
that's incredible, because that job kind of give you 2 things that were like super valuable. Is the first part is the courage to talk to strangers, and then see the value of them talking back to you, and then kind of enjoying that feedback loop. And then the losing weight part, and then the transformation, the visual transformation. That's fascinating. It's just one summer. That's all it took.
My life changed.
Wow, that's fascinating. And then, so what made you want to go to the military?
I always had this like streak of risk taker / adventurer in me.
Yeah.
That's why I ran away from home when I was 9 years old, and I was always the kid that would take the dares on the playground, and I just didn't see myself going to college. I didn't have that role model of anyone going to college. No one was telling me to take SATs. No one was telling me to go to college. They were just like, yeah, you'll go figure it out, because my parents, that's what they did. They just figured it out. And so I was just like, I want to do something big. I thought like maybe someday I want to go to college, but like for right now, like I want to see the world and like challenge myself. I want to like test my mettle, because suddenly like I'd given all this like strength and power, and I just wanted to test myself. So I was like, I'm gonna go in the military, and part of me was like, oh yeah, I want to be like the hardcore like Navy SEAL guy. But then the smart person embedded in me was like, no, I need something that's like a transferable skill I can use later in life.
That's good.
So I settled on the Air Force, and I was like, I'm going to join the Air Force, and I'm going to go into technology. So I was an enlisted guy going in, and just, I was bottom of the barrel because, the smart kids, well, what they'll do is like the smart kids that have parents that college educated, they'll say like, hey, go get your college degree, you can do ROTC or whatever, then you go into the military. Suddenly you are a lieutenant in the military, and you actually, as a 23-year-old kid, you actually have more rank and seniority than a 50-year-old chief master sergeant that's been in the enlisted military forever. And I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that I had gone into that enlisted rank, and it's just a different culture. It's a totally different dynamic. But it was good for me because like it taught me how to relate to like literally anyone, right? Because I was in the trenches with these guys, and they just came from all walks of life, And some people were there because like it was like their last option. This is their only option. Some people were there because they wanted to serve their country, and a lot of different motivations.
Yeah.
But it was enlightening for me, to say the least.
So you were in Germany for how long?
2.5 years in Germany, and then a year and a half, like 2 years in Langley, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
And then you got out of the military?
Yeah, actually, the commander on the base in Germany, he realized, he saw that I had talent, and he was like, what the hell are you doing? And it was an enlisted guy. Like, he basically recruited me to be his, like, personal IT. So he just took me everywhere. He got me nominated for Airman of the Year. And then he got me into the Air Force Academy. So I had the opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy, but I just didn't see myself as a career military guy. I just thought that I had too much of a rebel. I need a little bit.
Yeah, so
space to move.
I was gonna say, it's like don't like to take orders.
Yeah, exactly. So I finished my tour of duty, and then I went back to get my undergrad, and I finished my undergrad in basically 2 years because
Nice.
I collected so much credits, nights and weekends of during the military that I just got out and knocked it out in 2 years. Then I got into the working world, and I spent a year working for a startup running operations. So I was doing logistics in the warehouse, and I was setting up the accounts receivable and like all kinds of small business stuff. And then I got seen by KPMG because because I was out of the military, and when I went into college, I just worked my butt off. And so I had a straight 4.0, and KPMG saw me, and they were like, what's this kid, like enlisted guy, goes back to college, gets a straight 4.0, let's go pick this guy up and make him a consultant. So that's what they did. They pulled me in, and they turned me into a management consultant. And that was the beginning of a more normal track for, let's say.
That's interesting.
For someone.
That's right.
Yeah.
So now let's go back to the parents. So what did your parents do well that you appreciate and that you think you're going to use with your kids?
I think they really instilled work discipline in me. There was no getting out of work. It didn't matter if it was snowing outside, if it was hot outside, if it was raining. You dress for the weather, and you get out there and you drive those fence posts in the ground. And I remember several times like trying to like talk my way out of work or like whatever, and it's just like no, you're out there, you're gonna get it done. And almost to the point that's a little bit militant. This day and age, it wouldn't fly.
Yeah.
It would be seen as potentially something that is frowned upon. I don't know, child labor laws or something might come to mind, but whatever.
Yeah.
I think it was great. I think it would really taught me what hard work looks like, and resilience and grit. Like that's what I saw.
So what were you doing and for how long? So you'd come from school and then start working, or you wake up early in the morning and do work?
In the mornings, I just had like my standard routine of like feeding the animals. And then in the afternoons, I would also have to feed the animals, but also I had, for example, I had to pick up all the eggs. So like, and these ostrich eggs, right? You've seen an ostrich egg.
Yeah, they're big, yeah.
And we keep these ostrich in these 2-acre pens, and because they were breeding in the pen and stuff, and so they would lay an egg every other day. So part of my duties were I would wait until they laid the egg, and I'd wait till they're at the other side of the pen, because these animals, they run 40 miles an hour, they're
Yeah.
10 feet tall, they can kick a man in the
They're
chest,
vicious.
like crush your rib cage, like they're
Yeah.
mean animals.
Yeah.
So I had to go collect these damn eggs, and what I would do is I would just wait till the other end of the pen, and I would sneak out there, and I'd grab the egg, tuck it under the arm like a football, and I'd turn around and start running. And then these ostrich, they would turn and they would start running after me. And so I would have this plastic PVC pipe, and I would reach back behind me and I would like bop them on the head so they couldn't kick me. So yeah, I mean, I did collect them like a $5 a week, like, allowance for risking my life to collect these ostrich eggs for my parents that were printing money off of them. So I would do that, and then in the fall it was pecan season. We had pecan trees, so I would have to be hands and knees like picking up pecans, and I think I got 10% for every bag I picked. In the winters, we had a firewood business, so we chopped down trees, cut cords of wood. I would stack the cords of wood and do the splitting, and I would deliver it to people's houses. So I got a small wage for that. So it taught me about money.
Yeah.
They taught me about business, and they used that property for every way you could think of, right? They were running animals on it, they were using the pecans, and they were doing the firewood business. It was kind of amazing.
That's incredible.
They made
So
money.
so the they were selling the ostriches, they were not selling the meat.
Right. We would sell the ostrich to other people that were basically doing the same thing, that were
Got it.
breeding ostrich.
So you were breeding.
And I don't know where these ostriches ultimately ever ended up. We were like, they could still be in a zoo somewhere, but
How long did they
ultimately-
usually live?
They're all gone and passed away now, I'm sure. But we were not in the slaughtering business. We
Yeah.
didn't slaughter them, and we if we did have one that occasionally would get chased by a coyote and maybe hit the fence and die, we would harvest every bit we could, because you can do so many things with the skin,
Yeah.
the feathers, and everything else.
So you were eating a lot of ostriches at all, or
Well, we'd put
Once in a
that
while.
meat in the freezer, and we would
Got
have
it.
that ostrich meat for a while. Yeah, for sure.
interesting?
But
That's
even
really-
the eggs were so valuable, you weren't making omelets out of them.
That's-
So.
You were not.
No. They were super valuable. You put that thing you put that thing in the incubator, you turn it into money. Yeah.
Wow. So
Even
so,
the shell, you could sell the shell for $50.
Wow, that's incredible. So what do you think your parents should have done? What are some of the things that they didn't do well as parents, if you will?
So my dad was great at being the authority, and great at being very hardcore and driving discipline. He was a disciplinarian. Like, they used corporal punishment on me. It was a thing. The thing I missed was feeling the love, right? And so what I've learned about parenting is, like, it's got to be both.
Yeah.
You can be hard and hold boundaries and hold the line, but you also have to show the love. Because
Yeah.
what ended up happening is, like, I ended up just kind of hating him.
Yeah.
And we didn't come to terms until I was 18, and he had cancer. He had 6 months to live.
Wow.
And so that was when we finally reconnected.
Wow. That's tough. And how about your mom?
My mom, she was a great businesswoman, and she was one of the ones that was driving my sister and I so much. And my sister's very driven, and she's got her own like real estate business and stuff now. But she was my go-to comfort for sure, and I think for her, she could have been a little softer too. Both my parents are pretty hardcore.
Well, being in the farm, being in that environment, on the ranch in that environment with that level of work ethic, it hardens you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and both of my parents, I mean, they grew up hard and poor. Like, my dad grew up on a dairy farm. My mom worked in a fruit stand. So her whole childhood was working in a fruit stand and selling, strawberries and bananas to people. So
That's crazy. And so what are some of the values that you obviously work ethic, that's a big one. What are some values that you took from them that you're bringing to your kids?
yeah, I think work ethic is the number one. I think they were good at setting boundaries, which I think is important. You got to choose your battles. I think that they did that pretty well. They let us get away with certain things, and then there were certain things they were they were pretty hardcore about. But, you know, like I remember running around all summer long without shoes on, and, you know, like I would end up staying, you know, hitting stickers or getting bug bites or whatever it is. And like this day and age, I would be like freaking out if my kids were doing that.
Yeah.
At least my wife would. But they let that kind of stuff go. But, you know, but at the dinner table, like you showed up on time, you were, you know, you used your silverware properly, and like that, they were hardcore about that. So I think that's good. I think it's good to like choose your battles, pick your boundaries.
Yeah, no, that's true. So what? So now, as you're raising your own kid, what is your goal with your own kids?
Oh man. Okay, so I'll tell you this. My parents were probably a little bit too focused on creating money at the expense of some other things. And I've spent my life like kind of like trying to do that. I chose like the corporate ladder, and I climbed the corporate ladder and have done really well at that. But, you know, I want my kids to really just be well-rounded individuals. Like I'm trying to, like my son, like I play the guitar with him, and he's becoming obsessed with the guitar. Like he loves to play. I mean, if that kid wants to be, if he wants to go out and like try to make a music career, I'm going to be like, go for it. Do what your heart wants, man. Just like go live your life. Because life is so short. You just got to go do what feels good and right. I want them to have agency over their life, and I want them to feel in control and like be pushing in a direction. Now, if I see them stagnant, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
Like, but if I'm pushing towards whatever it is that their dream and their goal is, that thing that is going to, that combination of their, what do the Japanese call the Ikegi or
Ikigai.
Or,
Ikigai.
yeah, yes, thank you. Obviously my pronunciation is terrible, but it's that combination of what the world needs and what you're good at contributing and what's going to make you happy.
Yeah. Well, you gotta get the other one. What the world will pay for.
That's right.
That's the part. So it's a fascinating thing, because we talk to a lot of people who kind of like almost like overcorrect for their parents. So how do you balance it where you give them more freedom and lack of focus on, or a little bit less focus on the financials and the money part, but at the same time you don't want them to be like have too many, like be paralysis by analysis, or have too many options that you don't do anything, and completely not want any money and just be a bum.
Totally.
So no.
So like, for example, my wife and I had this conversation about like college. For example. Like nobody paid for my college. I paid for my own college. And my wife is like, we should just pay for the kids' college. I'm like, no, absolutely not. We tell them they're not getting college paid for. They need to figure out scholarships, and they need to figure out how to pay for college on their own. Now, if after they go through college and we see that they're saddled up with a bunch of debt and both kids are through school, yeah, maybe we'll pay off their debt.
Yeah.
But I don't want them having this mindset that we are there to bail them out, or that life is a free ride, And I'm even thinking about like now, like my son, he's going to be 4, and I'm already thinking about ways I can teach him about money. Like I'm exploring, like, do I set him up with a vending machine?
Yeah.
And get him like thinking about like what kind of candy bar is going to make the most revenue.
Yeah.
And like what should I put in this machine to get him and then that's part of his allowance. Like he gets a cut of whatever the vending machine makes. I'm like, so I want to teach those values, but I just want to balance it. So
well, I think you could take that idea another step, which is great. I like it. One part that I wouldn't do like an allowance piece, but I would make it where he's kind of like a GP-LP relationship. And so so he's got like, he's, I don't know, he owns 30% of it. He didn't put any money. He collects 30% of the net profit after you pay the debt and pay the equipment and pay all that stuff. And you may not make any money for the first few months, and then eventually at some point it's going to catch up, and then at the end he's going to get a check. For, you know what I mean? And I think that would be, because it truly aligns. It's not like a charity, or it's not like a haphazard amount of money. And it's not a salary. It's not a fee for service. It's true ownership.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But I like it. That's a good idea.
It'd be something for us to do together, right? You go say, when we go to Costco, like we go walk down the aisle, we pick the stuff, we go put it in the machine, and then just watch the money flow in. See what
Yeah,
happens.
take a picture of the receipt, enter it in the system, make sure that
Yeah.
you're tracking the expenses, profit. Yeah, that's fascinating. That'll be fun. That'll be a fun project for with him for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so you want him to be financially literate, understand kind of like how to create resources
Right.
and then have the freedom to choose where to allocate their attention and their focus. What else? What other values you want them to have, or what other goals do you have for them?
I think another one is a big focus on family. We were a very nuclear family, but it wasn't drilled in me as much as I want to drill it into my kids. Like the importance of just always being there for your family, for your siblings, for your parents, and it just kind of all goes both ways. And I think it's one of the downsides of the American culture is like we don't lean into family enough. And my wife's Italian, so I'm seeing it firsthand how it's just different.
Yeah.
Her mom is staying with us right now because like we need some support because I'm traveling. I've been in Europe for the last 3 weeks, so she just came in and stayed, and it was just like helping my wife take care of the kids. So
Nice.
whereas I would feel really bad putting that on my mom, and like different models. Just
Yeah, it is fascinating that difference between Europe or other Mediterranean because obviously Europe is not all the same. The Mediterranean countries are a little
Yeah.
bit warmer, a little bit more family oriented than the North, Europeans, the Swedes or and so it's a fascinating dynamic. So, what are some of the other things in terms of like raising kids that your Italian wife is pushing for that you find different?
you know, family's the biggest one that she presses on. Yeah, I mean, I think we are pretty aligned
Okay,
in the way that we think about and wanting to prioritize. I think the only difference is that I press a little bit harder for the boundaries,
got it.
and she's a little bit more soft-hearted. I'm willing to let kids cry because
Okay,
I realize that's their language, and it's you gotta listen to the kind of cry. Like, are you in pain? Is this something you need, or are you whining, crying?
try to get attention.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I'm pretty discerning. Maybe I lean too much in the wrong direction, and she probably leans too much the other direction. So we probably balance each other out.
That's cool. So how do you add more of that love and connection that you were not exposed to as a kid? How do you do that yourself with your kids?
I tell my kids I love them every day, and if I notice a disconnect, these kids are like, if you read their faces, like when you're disconnected.
Yeah.
So this weekend, like we went to Palm Springs, and it's a new environment. We're all like sleeping in a hotel room. Nobody's getting any sleep, and my daughter, I had to like correct her on a few things, and I noticed that she was just a little distant to me, and so I got her by herself and went out on the balcony, and she's only 2.5, but she's emotionally just in tune and just great language, and I just said, "Are you upset with Papa?" And she said, "Yes." Like, can you tell me why? And I just got her to open up and tell me like why she was upset with me, and then just reinforce like why I was trying to keep her safe, why I was trying to teach her, and that I loved her. So I think it's just being able to be vulnerable like that, be observant of the kids and seeing when they're like disconnected, and I think they appreciate it. It's actually they really need that structure and those hard guidelines. Like my son, he was chasing chasing my daughter around, and like I had to really discipline him, and I thought it was going to ruin the day. Sometimes it does, but I combined that, and then I gave him some love afterwards and affection, and man, it was just like he was great the rest of the day, and he stopped hitting his sister, and it's a constant battle. It's a daily battle.
They know they're very smart. They understand when they push the boundary and then they get a feedback and
Yeah.
and as long as you keep going and you move on and you don't hold it against them, they get it, which is awesome. So you having been in the tech world, having been an AI enthusiast, And so what do you think of technology in general and kids?
Yeah, big one. So I guess there's two categories. There's the emerging world of AI, and then there's the traditional. I don't even know if it's traditional, but the screen time, the tablets. So I'll take those as two separate things. I I am somewhere in the middle. Like I'm not a hardcore anti-screen person because screens are part of our life now, and they are something where the jobs of the future are going to go to the people that have the right talent that can compete that grew up in this environment. So if you completely take them out of that environment entirely for all of their childhood, they're going to be at a disadvantage, I feel like. At the same time, like I grew up on a farm and I got outside and I ran in the rain and like I wanted my kids to do that. So I like the rules around, essentially adjusting the screen time based on their age. And we really only allow screen time in certain situations. Like if we're on an airplane, if we are at a fine dining restaurant and nothing else is working, or if they're really sick. Those are pretty much the three scenarios. And then we will do once a week, we'll do a family night, a movie night. We'll get a pizza and we'll watch, some Pixar film together. So that's how we're approaching the screens. I don't want my kids though to have anything to do with social media. Like that'll be something I'll be militant about. No social media until they're 18 probably. AI is a different animal. So AI is this new thing that one of the dangers of it is it becomes a crutch. And so it becomes this thing where you don't actually have to remember anything or think about anything because you can just ask the AI. Like for example, I was having coffee with somebody last week and we were chatting and I was sitting there and wanted to recommend a book for him because he was interested in doing passive investing and I was like there's this great book and I was like I can't remember the name of it, like let me send it to you after this. And so afterwards, like I was sitting there racking my brain, so I was like, I'll just ask ChatGPT, it'll know the name of the book. And then I was like, no, I can't do that because that's exactly what's going to happen to everyone is it's just going to become a crutch. And then sure enough, that night at dinner, it just popped in my head and I remembered the book. And so I think the danger with AI is that we just become too soft in terms of our ability to remember, to process, to challenge, all those things. And so it's going to be a great benefit to society, but I think we at the same time need to keep ourselves sharp and our kids sharp.
Yeah, it is a challenge because it's really hard not to use the tool and then for the sake of efficiency and quality. But I agree with you. It does create this fragility where we all become soft and forget about how, in the same way as literally just using a GPS on going to places. We used to remember we would actually ask the question how to get to somewhere, and then people will give us directions. And then if we feel that we're getting lost, we'll ask somebody on the street. And a lot of times the directions are turn at the McDonald's or turn at the thing. It's not even the street name. And then you develop the map in your head about where things are. And now it takes me like a long time to figure out in my own city.
Yes.
Yes.
No, I'm with you. Well, and so, somebody might have the counter argument. They might say, this is like the calculator, right? Everybody
Yeah.
over like worried about calculators and like,
Yes.
now like you use a calculator, you know how math works, but you use a calculator to make it a shortcut. And this is
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
But I would argue it's different. And I would argue it's different because actually what people don't realize is that language and thinking are very intertwined. There was this person that had some kind of brain damage and they lost the ability to speak, to even think in a language. And basically somehow doctors were able to repair that. And what they described during that period where they didn't have language is effectively this just big black hole in their memory because they weren't thinking. And so there's been multiple studies about this like that just show like you actually think in language. Without language you would not be able to think. And so take the example of you need to write an essay, and then we've all done this where you write an essay and the school teacher says go back, write it again half as long. You do that, Then you turn it in. They say, go back, write it again, half as long, right? And that process is a thinking process. And so if we take away that from children and that ability to force their brain to go do that, we're hindering their ability to think, in my mind. So that's my point. It's like that's
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean it is a fascinating part of the way these kids are going to grow. They're just going to have to adapt to an ecosystem where these tools exist and their peers are using them, and they have to pick and choose, where to allocate that resource and where to hold back and just use their own, organic brains. and that's why I like to it's this stuff is going so fast, and I can see a world very soon where, what is the Elon Musk Neuralink?
really
Yeah, I could see that happening
quick.
like in our lifetime. And
Absolutely.
so if that happens, and then your kids have to compete in the marketplace. Now you're good, you're fine, but they have to compete in the marketplace, and with other people. Do they plug in to the Neuralink, or did they stay out with all the dynamics that are gonna happen? What would you recommend to them?
Wave 2. Don't go wave 1.
Okay, so go.
What's going to happen.
Yes.
But you want to be on the early part of that adoption curve.
You don't. Yeah.
You want to be the cyborg because it's going to be a huge advantage. It's going to be a
Yes.
massive advantage. And as long as you train your brain to think critically, and you just have, let's imagine these Neuralinks. I mean, it's basically an instant access to the world's knowledge.
Yes.
And as long as you can think critically, and then you have instant access to the world's knowledge, like, wow,
But-
you are like off to the races. That's like an amazing thing.
But we're just talking about it. Remember, like so think
We
about
got to
this
force
thing.
our kids to learn to think like that manually.
But
in
how?
their childhood.
But how? Think about it. So there's going to be a thought that's going to go into the system. It's got either can go to the organic side or go to the inorganic side. The inorganic side is so fast, and it will reason. It will go search for the info, reason, and give the answers so quickly. The inorganic side is just not going to be there. It's just going to be like a bunch of fat. It's not going to work anymore because that side is so quick. Before you even, you just saw it before you even like thought about what it is. The side of the AI side has like already grabbed the image, identified the image, and compared it to the other images, grabbed every data that exists about the thing, reasoned, gave you the calculation of all the different options, and then gave you the best one, and then like in a nanosecond.
Yeah. No,
There's no critical thinking.
It's
game over.
What's going to happen if we're lucky, Jay?
Yes.
Is that this technology will be ready in about 15 years, and we will be able to teach our generation at least to think critically.
Yes.
So by the time they plug in, they'll be like you and I plugging in, which we'll be okay. We'll be okay.
Yeah.
Now that next generation, my grandkids, I don't know what to tell them yet.
That's crazy. Yeah, and I mean it's incredible. So in terms of like, obviously, your kids are little, and then you could tell a little bit their tendencies, so who do you think of your kids is going to be the more entrepreneurial? Who's the one that's going to be the chief operating officer? Who's the salesperson? Who's the can you recognize? Can you see it already?
I do see some of this. So there's actually this great podcast called How to Take Over the World, and this guy, he reads all these biographies of all these people throughout history, like the Napoleons of the world and Benjamin Franklin's and everything. He does these biographies, and he talks about Julius Caesar and all these commonalities and these common traits that people have. And I see a lot of these common traits. One of the biggest common traits is like a super high energy level. Like all these leaders who had this amazing capacity for energy.
Yeah.
And I see that in my son. He has got more energy, an abundance of energy, even amongst his peers. And like all kids like have like a ton of energy, but he's got this abundance of energy. And he has, one of the things that his weakness is, it's hard to describe, but he is a little bit, he's not super emotionally in tune like my daughter is. Like his EQ is not super strong. So he's actually one of these people that's going to be, I don't want to say ruthless, but he's going to be like a driver. And he's a bit of a bruiser. So and he seems pretty sharp. So if anybody's going to be like like a high profile executive or CEO or a small business owner, like I think he is. My daughter, on the other hand, is just so kind, so sweet, like has got a ton of empathy. She just was making eye contact and observing people way sooner than my son was. She just has all of those traits. And so I don't think she's going to go down that road, and I wouldn't want her to. So, they both have their total dynamics, and they're so different. Like my wife's Italian. My son, he looks Italian. He doesn't even look like my son. My daughter looks exactly like me.
That's funny.
So we got one in one. We got one in one. So
that's cool. That's really cool. And obviously kids are that young, they transform, they grow, they change, you know what I mean? Their brains develop. But it's fun to kind of see that nurture, and help them kind of like identify, their blind spots, with him, you're not going to worry about his energy or his IQ, but you're going to like focus on his EQ and give him some tips on, when this happens, do this. And when
Empathy.
Yes. Yeah. And then, for her, you try to give her a little bit more, toughness, or a little bit more, how to deal with bullies and how to deal with, mean people, or how to deal with the world. But it's a lot of fun. So what do you think? So, in terms of like health, how do you teach them to be healthy? Is that a thing that you actually talk about, or you just let them learn from you guys?
It's not something yet that I'm feeling the need to preach about or anything like that. I want them to see that I have a home gym. So like they see me working out.
Nice.
Sometimes my daughter yells, like wants me to stop grunting in the gym, like it's good that they see me working and working out. And then in the house, food wise, like we cook a lot, not a lot, but we cook a pretty decent amount. And so we kind of make the food choices for them. We don't really keep a bunch of really bad food in the house. And so they're learning a little bit through osmosis at right now. And they're so young, being like, 2 and 3, that I'm not so worried about it.
Yeah.
When I will start to teach them though, as they start to mature a little bit and start teaching them about proteins versus carbs and like glycemic index, and I'll start teaching them all that stuff. But right now it's just, they're just observing.
Nice. And in terms of like school education, what's your thought there?
Yeah, we actually have our kids, they've been part of like this Walden style program. It's like outdoor school. It's just, it's been like one day a week they're gardening, and one day a week they're cooking, and one day a week they're just like constantly outdoors and just experiencing that. And partly that's because like I grew up on a farm, and like I saw that, and like I feel like that's a great thing for children to be exposed to, and just to be outside most of the time. We're here in San Diego, the weather's amazing all the time, so it's like why not just have the kids in the backyard instead of in the classroom? And I think I am good with doing that until they get to be closer to school age. And at that point, we're probably going to send our kids to a good public school, because we have a good public school that we have in mind. And I think the socialization aspect is pretty great. I've explored the idea of homeschooling, and there's pros and cons to that, but right now I think we're going to stick with the public school route until we find it's not working for us, or the kids aren't developing the way we want, or there's those kind of problems. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Nice. College, no college, or are you gonna let them?
College might be a whole different thing with AI.
Yes.
So it's hard.
What do you think is gonna happen?
I have a 529 plan. I'm saving for their colleges, but I don't know. I don't know what that's going to turn out like.
Can they can they convert the 529 into
buy a house?
Can you buy a house? They can buy a house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can. Okay. They can't use it as money to start a business.
Maybe, but
okay.
The point is, I did look into this. The point is, they can use the money for other things besides college.
Okay. Good. Yeah, I always thought that that's strictly for college, and I always stayed away from it. But that's good. Yeah, that's good. Cool. Well, this was great, Josh. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it's great. Always great catching up, Jay. So great questions. Appreciated the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alrighty.